Hello, it's Taylor and welcome to my video. Today I wanted to talk about sort of the idea that you can't really escape yourself, but to sort of turn it into a positive idea. I just read this book, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. A lot of people know the story. It's about this guy and he's friends with Dr. Jekyll. He kind of is unsure about this friend that Dr. Jekyll has, which is Mr. Hyde. Turns out he's the same person as Dr. Jekyll. I pulled a quote that I guess sort of inspired me. It's on page 90 of my copy. It says, "He had now seen the full deformity of that creature that shared with him some of the phenomena of consciousness and was co-heir with him to death. And beyond these links of community, which in themselves made the most poignant part of his distress, he thought of Hyde, for all his energy of life, as of something not only hellish but inorganic." I kind of wanted to talk about that quote today. It gave me a lot of ideas. I wrote down some notes to sort of preface what I'm going to talk about. You take with you all of who you are. You bring all yourselves with you to death. So be exactly who you want to bring around. Do you wish to be the type of person to compliment others on the street? Be that person and carry them with you always. When it comes to this book, I don't really believe that Hyde is an external monster. I think that more so he's part of Jekyll's consciousness and therefore part of what Jekyll carries with him to death. I kind of want to expand upon the impossibility of being able to divide oneself cleanly, and I think that this is why Jekyll's experiment doesn't quite work. Hyde is Jekyll without restraint, and the experiment in the book kind of explores this. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the experiment is Dr. Jekyll creating this, I guess, other conscious being within himself, which is Mr. Hyde. Hyde is not actually another being, though. The experiment reveals that mortality is a management of impulses, but it doesn't remove these impulses. Earlier, I said be exactly who you want to bring around with you, and I stand by this. Character is built through repeated action, so the self becomes a collection of actions and habits and moral choices. Those habits eventually define who someone is. But with Jekyll, he tries to separate his actions from his identity. The novel proves that actions shape the self instead. Jekyll attempts to externalize his immoral impulses through Hyde, but the novel ultimately shows that identity is inseparable from action. I keep thinking about that line in the novel where Jekyll realizes that Hyde shares his consciousness. Hyde isn't some demon that possessed Jekyll. He's actually a part of his soul and his self, which to me means that you never actually get to separate yourself from the parts of you that you don't like. Jekyll thinks that the experiment will help him to divide into two separate people, one good and one bad. But really, it's not that Hyde is this completely new creature. It's that Hyde is what Jekyll already was, just more free. He's stripped of guilt, stripped of consequence, and stripped of reputation. He doesn't really exist. And that made me think about the idea that maybe the self isn't something stable or fixed. Maybe the self is just a collection of habits that we repeat over time. This brought me back to something that Aristotle talked about thousands of years ago. He said that virtue isn't something that you're born with. It's something you build through repeated action. You become a certain type of person because you keep choosing certain actions that result in certain behaviors over and over again. So if you repeatedly act kindly, eventually kindness becomes part of who you are. However, the same is true in the opposite direction. And that's what Jekyll doesn't understand. He thinks that he can separate his actions from his identity. He thinks that he can commit the sins while Jekyll remains morally clean. But this novel basically destroys that idea, because Hyde is still him. Hyde is still Jekyll. The consciousness is shared and impulses come from the same place. And in the end, Hyde is something revealed through Jekyll, not something that Jekyll created through science. So I wrote down, you bring all yourselves with you to death. I mean that you can't leave certain versions of you behind. Every choice you make, every decision you make, every thought you have becomes part of the person who you will be carrying around, who you are carrying around, which kind of makes everyday actions become just that much bigger. Like, do you want to be the kind of person who compliments strangers on the street? Then do that. Because every time you do it, you're reinforcing that version of yourself. It's part of like sculpting the person who you want to be. There's this Nietzsche idea called becoming who you are. And it sounds simple, but what he really means is that identity isn't something that you find. It's something that you build through living. You are constantly becoming a result of your habits. And in this book, Jekyll tries to cheat that. He tries to outsource the darker parts of what's inside him to another body. But the novel kind of insists that this is impossible. You don't get to just split who you are into the good person and the bad person. You're just one complicated human being containing both. And that's what everyone is. I think that the real moral of this story isn't just about good versus evil. I think it's also about taking responsibility for yourself and who you're creating. Because in the end, the person that you become is the person that you're gonna have to be carrying around with you. Anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know if you want me to do something else. Ciao.